The restraint techniques that are demonstrated and practiced by adults in training sessions look entirely sensible. They look proportionate and they look safe. Tick. Fully restraint trained box. The problem is that we're not being asked to restrain adults in safe environments with mats around. Restraining children means there's a huge disparity in size, strength, weight and height. Techniques that worked out really well in rehearsal play out very differently in the classroom. Feet leave the floor, children struggle and get into awkward positions, the noise level increases and crowds can gather. Restraining children of any age is a gamble with their safety and your career. And before you roll the dice, you need to think about mitigating your risk. The trouble with any physical restraint is that it is a judgment call made in an urgent situation. There are no absolute answers, but there's a great deal of good practice out there that we can learn from. Decisions made in a moment can easily unravel in the principal's office or worse still in a court of law. If you make the decision to physically intervene, make sure that you talk your way through it. Out loud, clearly, calmly. Tell the child what you're doing and why. Tell other children what you're doing. Help them feel that their teacher is in control, even though under the surface you're paddling and panicking. As you hold the child, constantly check their emotional and physical state. Be prepared to change or release your hold if they complain of being unable to breathe. It's essential that you have sight of the child's face at all times so that you can monitor their reaction accurately. Hold the long bones. Don't restrict or compress the airways. If you've been trained in restraint, use your training. Use the holds that are necessary and the minimal force possible. Whenever possible, enlist the support of a colleague before you intervene. I know that it's not a perfect world and that's not always possible. If you can plan, then take time to do it well. Talk through the holds you'll use and examine the route you're going to take to remove the child from the situation. Think of the obvious stuff as well as the unlikely. Is the child an asthmatic? Do you need to pass other classes? Which is the nearest safe place that you can sit and allow the child to calm down? What about negotiating doorways, steps? How will you prevent other children from getting involved? It would be entirely sensible to say that physical restraint should be the last resort. The problem is that nobody can really agree what last resort is. It would be entirely sensible to say that physical restraint should only follow a full risk assessment, intensive form filling and protracted negotiation. Put the Lego down and step away from the system. We have the toilets surrounded. In many schools, one child who refuses to move can cause a classroom evacuation quicker than the arrival of the local fire brigade. Yet, we can all give examples of when a swift and assertive early intervention averted a protracted standoff and nipped the incident in the bud. There are times when acting gently and swiftly can stop a standoff turning into a siege. There are children who benefit from being restrained, weirdly some who appreciate it. Your main focus must be to act in the best interests of the child. It's this defence that often trumps reasonable or proportionate if there are questions posed subsequently. As with all management of behaviour, the relationships you develop with the child and the family are pivotal. The knowledge you have of the child directly affects your ability to decelerate or to de-escalate. The problem is that de-escalation to one teacher is merely a preamble for another. This inconsistency means that creating behaviour plans for children, we must be specific about the stages of intervention and the time given between them. There is clearly a difference between the child who regularly disrupts the smooth running of the school or college as they embark on their daily rooftop protests and the child who's just having a bad day and decides to refuse to move. Distinguishing between passive resistance and active violent resistance will help in deciding whether you intervene physically or if time, patience, and some gentle reassurance will calm the situation. I've heard less experienced teachers describe de-escalation as telling them to calm down or giving them 3 chances. Others describe nuances of tone, assertive yet empathetic language, and giving plenty of take-up time. To create the consistency you need to work with the most tricky or defiant behaviours, there has got to be a consistent agreement between all adults as to exactly what de-escalation means and precisely the strategies that work with individuals. Often when you intervene and you have to restrain, it's impossible to plan in the moment. Intervening to ensure that children don't hurt themselves or others rarely affords time for protracted risk assessments and lengthy chin stroking. If you have to act as you are thinking, then focus on using the minimum force necessary to keep everyone safe. Clearly, the force has got to be proportionate to the situation and its consequences. It's no use trying to gently guide Carl away when she's got a fistful of Chantel's hair and a finger in her eye. Just as sending in the SLT SWAT team to stop Trevor chewing the curtains might be a touch too eager. Step away from the folded pleats, etc., etc. Remember, you're being judged first and foremost on what is written down and not by what happened. You need to log everything carefully so that others can see that the choices you made in the heat of the moment were in the best interests of the child. If you had to restrain a child, inform the parents as soon as possible. Arrange to meet with them. Draw up a plan so that if the need arises again, you're all on the same page. Now you need to repair trust urgently with the child. Allow them to talk through the incident with you when things are calm. And of course, you also need to turn attention to yourself, because being involved in physical restraints and physical interventions can have a huge impact on everybody concerned. Before you go home, take time to offload, debrief with a colleague. As things stand, whether or not force is necessary is a matter that's determined on a case-by-case basis. This means that you are being asked to rely on your instincts and to make very fine professional judgments, sometimes in the middle of very chaotic situations. The decision is not whether to act or not, but how best to execute your duty of care. Doing nothing is not an option, but that doesn't mean you have to wade in or physically restrain either. Your duty of care means that you have to do something. If your dynamic risk assessment is that the physical intervention will make the situation worse, then you need to go and get help. There is risk involved in using physical restraint. Of course, risks that you estimate in a matter of a second don't always give accurate results. Sometimes it's better to step in before a drama turns into a crisis. Sometimes it's better to allow the crisis to subside. Sometimes observing, waiting, negotiating is not an option. There is no way to accurately predict outcomes. You have to have trust in your training, belief in your experience, and in your instinct. I don't think we can tick box for that.